On behalf of the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences, it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you here today for the virtual edition of the 18 Gender Summit in partnership with Portia. Gender Summit Africa platforms present and discuss research from a gender perspective toward a scientific understanding of issues that are important to Africa. The aim is to ensure that research outcomes and application benefit women and men equally.
UNESCO has two global priorities, one being Africa and the second being gender equality. So bringing this together, young women in STEM in Africa is one of the biggest priorities for UNESCO. STEM education for girls in rural areas need to incorporate current topics like climate change, disaster risk reduction, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. It is crucial that the girls and young women are taught about the advances in agricultural methods and the need for the world and the planet and locally for their community so that they are encouraged to take up jobs in the sector as well.
A key value for AIMS is gender parity in science, and they're working towards a student body that is 50% women. This is an impressive goal considering the underrepresentation of women in the mathematical sciences around the world, and particularly in Africa.
I would love to say that in academia there is no structural sexism or racism. We unfortunately know better. That is why we are here. We are responsible for our societies and our research systems, and we have to discuss these matters openly but vigorously. In my view, the best possible research is done when researchers are funded due to their excellence. Consequently, we at the DFG are convinced that no one should be excluded from a career in research on the basis of academically irrelevant factors.
To do that, we need to involve ourselves in advocacy, in communication, in politics.
Commission of Rural Economy and Agriculture is trying to bring women in strongly, and this program will address women and will target women in agriculture.
This shows the progress toward SDGs. The SDGs Index and Dashboard report has been published annually since 2016. This describes each country's progress toward achieving SDGs.
In September 2019, so not very long ago, the current Secretary General of UN, Antonio Guterres, spoke at the high-level political forum and expressed this comment: no country is on track to meeting the goal of gender equality, without which none of the other goals will be met. And in fact, this is the progress on gender is stalling. And so it's interesting to know why is it that there is no progress being made. So when one looks at the last 5 years of SDGs, from a gender perspective, the thing we can say is that actually the progress has been disappointing.
And at IDRC, we contribute to this shared goal by supporting research that is transformative of those underlying gender relations that contribute to inequality. Gender inequality holds back progress on eliminating poverty. It blocks us from making real progress on improving lives and livelihoods for all, while building really a better, more sustainable world. It's really time to accelerate. IDRC supports researchers to work with communities, decision makers, and civil society organizations to bring evidence on why things should change, to build momentum for change, to show what works well or less well to bring about those changes, and to show the societal benefit of improving gender equality.
We've had decades of gender frameworks, gender mainstreaming and gender integration. We've used the Harvard framework, the Mosa framework, and these gender analysis frameworks have been very instrumental in helping us get an understanding of gender differences and gender gaps. And they've really been key in terms of how we integrate gender in not just agriculture research, but agriculture development and policy planning. However, key gaps have remained, mainly because these gaps have not always addressed the underlying causes of gender inequality.
There's a lot of importance in working also with men. If we focus just on female-headed households and women in the society, yet the main decision makers are men, our data needs to start looking a little bit more into what do masculinities mean and how can we use this data to influence change.
Gender considerations are extremely essential. So we basically weaved this into the design of the program from the beginning, and we formulated a gender strategy to ensure that gender and issues relating to inequalities are integrated into our research plans across our water security observatories.
It is clear that we cannot all thrive without the full and equal participation of women. Globally, women make up 43% of the agricultural labor force and produce half of the world's food supply. Yet because of gender inequalities, women around the world currently earn 20 to 30% less on average than their male counterparts. In rural areas, women not only earn less, but they are also more likely than men to hold seasonal, part-time, and low-wage jobs. Women also play an important role in mitigating the effects of climate change. But unfortunately, women face a number of constraints to realizing their potential due to lack of access to land, inputs, and financial resources. Canada aims to protect and promote the human rights of women and girls, increase their participation in equal decision-making, and facilitate their more equitable access to and control over productive resources and benefits.
We have begun to focus across the board, not just on the productivity gap, but also on agribusinesses, access to finance in markets and trade, increasing and amplifying the voice of women through policy advocacy, through representations, through industry associations and networks, and then looking at the policies themselves and the support of the governments towards women in ag and food systems.
It is really inspiring to see experts from all over the world coming together, albeit virtually, to discuss from a scientific perspective the interactions between agriculture, climate change, and gender, as well as to identify best practices in innovation, development interventions, education, entrepreneurship, and policy measures relevant for Africa. The European Union takes gender equality very seriously. Furthermore, gender equality is not just a priority that we as the EU set ourselves to achieve internally, but it is also a priority for our engagement with the world.
In Ethiopia, as all of you should know, agriculture accounts for almost all employment, and also almost all smallholder farmers still rely on rain-fed agriculture. So irrigation is seen as a quite huge untapped potential for agricultural production and food security. And there's also, in this context, a big importance to understand how gender actually shapes these big irrigation interventions.
One example of our work on gender equality is the second phase of the Growth and Economic Opportunities for Women Initiative, or GROW, focusing on Eastern Africa. So multidisciplinary teams of researchers will test solutions that promote gender equality and women's economic empowerment at work, at home, and also in daily life. The goal is to address persistent economic gender gaps in Eastern Africa through effective and evidence-informed programs and policies.
Most of our funding don't have the contents of a gender dimension because the female ratio of funding accepted people are very low. There are so many wonderful female researchers, but they don't apply to our funding. That is one problem.
Also inward looking for the funding agencies themselves. So how do we ensure that we are considering intersectionality in our own work, in the ways in which the research assessment processes and criteria are put into place, the way that we implement that? And I think in coming years, this work that is being undertaken is going to be important work for advocacy on why intersectionality is important in the context of a funding agency. I would say advocacy, 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 and we must not be relenting to just make sure that this work is on the face of our leadership at the different funding agencies. And then I think I would say exactly the same to the researchers. If your interest is in this area, please make sure that you don't relent in putting your research proposals to be funded by funding agencies either on the continent or outside of the continent, because I think this has become very important and topical.
On the knowledge level, considering gender and diversity dimension is not only a continuation of equity and equality in research content, but again has the potential to add value to research questions, research impact, research quality and excellence.
Gender inequality persists in the world at large, but particularly persists in this sector of science, technology and innovation, which many of us work in. And it persists on two levels: at the level of human capital development that is not transformed, that remains unequal, and also at the level of research design and content. Many of our organizations around the world have been attempting to fix this imbalance, to fix this inequality. Those are all good things. We've also tried to fix institutions and the knowledge base that we work from. But I think we all recognize that much more needs to be done. Much more needs to be done at a much more fundamental level to shift culture, norms, practices beyond just the numbers, but that real experience of gender and inequalities in our places of work and our institutions.
Even in programs that we're taking to the field, we're finding that still we only have less than 30% women participating at farmer engagement levels.
It is very easy to just be focused on the challenges, but even more importantly, it is critical to look for solutions, because we are focused on moving forward and not standing still at the same position or even worse, going backwards.
The goal was to reach 1 million smallholder farmers with digitally enabled products and services. So the whole focus of the program is to figure out how we can harness technology to accelerate the delivery of products and services to farmers. And each of the two programs had a target to reach 1 million farmers, 50% women. We're now reaching 5 million farmers. And depending on the country, in some countries we're reaching 45% women. In some countries we're reaching like 12% women. It's been our hardest target. It hasn't been hard to build these things or scale them, but it has been hard to reach our targets for women. The goal of the program is to focus on 5 different areas of innovation on digital platforms. We're using digital tools like mobile phones, but also voice recognition technology, using different kinds of things like chatbots. But these are the 5 areas of innovation that we focus funding on.
Agricultural TVET at both formal and informal level, ensuring that we have hands-on training which is contextualized, which responds to the needs of the learners, especially in rural areas. Having disaggregated data, we see that data is something which is really, really key. And I think also something which is very important is that we need to ensure that STEM, when we talk about STEM, especially in the formal education, it answers to the issues of climate change and to the issues of resilience.
Scientific African is a all sciences journal, and it's designed in partnership with the Next Einstein Forum. And together we've really created this beautiful vision of what a journal could be in order to support and represent scientific output that's being done in the African continent. And within 2 years, we've had over 3,000 submissions and over 550 papers published in the journal. It's phenomenal.